Houdini 20.5 is out, and with it has brought the new Copernicus context, or the new COPS context. So let's take a look at how we can use this to start generating some textures for our scenes. So Copernicus and COPS, they are going to be kind of used interchangeably, so you're going to hear me kind of use them both together. So just know that they will mean the same thing. But I'm in the Solaris context here. You can do this all inside of the Geo context if you want, or whatever, wherever you want. But I'm going to be working inside of Solaris because I think that there are some benefits to working inside of Solaris when you're doing this. So let's go ahead and drop down a COPNet. And there are two COPNets that we have available to us. We have COP Network Old, and that's obviously going to be the old COPNet. The new COPNet is the one that we want, the one that's just plain COPNet. That is going to be the new Copernicus context. So once we have this drop down, we have a few different settings here, and we'll be able to change these at any time, but I want to go over them just real quick. So we have our default resolution here. We have which is going to be, the default resolution will be what size our textures are that we're generating inside there. Our default pixel scale, so this is going to be like a multiplier basically of our resolution. So we'll talk about that here in a moment. We have our default border, so we have some different options here. We have constant, clamp, mirror, and wrap. We will also talk about that. We have precision. We have either 16 or 32-bit. I'm going to leave it on 32-bit. And then we have our tile visualization that we can crank up or down, which again, we're going to look at in just a moment. Let's go ahead and dive into this COPNet though. And in here, we have all of our settings that we just talked about right here on our little bar. So we can change all of these at any time. We also have this little button at the end. If we click that, it's going to bring up all of our options. And if I go ahead and check any of these, you see it's going to update on there. And if I look at our COPNet up here, it's going to change on there as well. So anything you change here or on any of these is going to change all three. So that's important to know, but the first thing that you're going to want to probably do when you drop down a COPNet is drop down a preview material node. So there's all sorts of different nodes that are available inside of the new COPS context. We're going to talk about them as we go, but probably the most important one is going to be this preview material. This is going to allow you to preview your materials. So we have a grid that is available to us by default. We can change this to a sphere, a box, a tube, a torus, or a shader ball, or we can even set up custom geometry with this. So there's multiple different ways to work with that, which we'll talk about in the future. But let's just kind of go over some of the things with this preview material and COPS here. So I'm going to set this back to a grid. I like to work with a grid just by default. I have a few settings up here. I'm going to leave everything the same except for this divisions. I'm going to crank this up to like 200. And now you're going to see that we have a much higher resolution grid, and that's just going to give our displacements a little bit of a higher fidelity. But for now, we're going to change this back. But for now, I'm going to set this back to 10 the default, just so I can show you what it's going to look like if you don't set that up. Let's go ahead and drop down a fractal noise, and we can use this to pipe into our displacement. So by default, there's a few different things. You see we have some different colors on the inputs and the outputs. If I go ahead and select this fractal noise, if I want to preview this, we can press R just like normal inside of Houdini, and it's going to pop up in here. And I've just pressed D on my viewport, and I've displayed the orthogrid. I've checked that off, and I've set the background to dark. We can either use our Solaris view here, or we can come up and we can create a new pane, tab type, a viewer, and we can do composite view, which I've already got right here. I've actually got a couple of them. And that's going to just give us our materials, or our nodes that we have set here. Now, we can't preview the preview material inside of this because this is for 2D images basically, which is why I say we just view this inside the scene view. If you want to get that same view, we can just come to set view and we can go to front viewport, and it's essentially the same thing. But we can come in here and preview our material with this as well on our actual geometry. I'm going to set that back to the perspective viewport because I kind of like to be able to tumble around my objects. So in our noise here, and a lot of things that we have, a lot of the nodes that we have inside of Houdini or COPS, we are going to have this signature option. So with this signature option, we have this mono, we have UV. Let's actually set this back to viewing our noise. We have mono, which is grayscale. We have UV, which is going to be a vector 2, RGB, which is a vector 3, and then RGBA, which is a vector 4. So let's set this back to mono, and let's go ahead and wire this into our height, and we can start to preview this material. And you can see that we have this being displaced now, but it is super, super low res. It doesn't look very good. It looks kind of crappy. It is being displaced a lot, so let's come into this normals and displace on our preview material. Let's maybe drop this down to like 0.1. But again, this still looks kind of crappy. So that's where these divisions come in. So if I jump this up to like 200, this may not update right away. I've noticed that sometimes that's an issue. So if we wanted to get that to fully reset, you can see that we now have all of our divisions showing here, and which they were before, but sometimes it glitches out. So we can wire this back into the height, and that should update if you are not getting a viewport update here. So just be aware that's something that you may have to do. Let's see if we can actually trigger that to happen. Yeah, see, you don't see that that goes super low res. If I disconnect this now, you're going to see that it goes back to that low res geometry. So I can crank this back up, and again, we see that it's not updating here. So let's just rewire that in. So that's just a little example there for you. So let's take a look at this noise. And with this noise, we see that it is at this resolution that we have set. We can crank this up to a much higher resolution if we want. And if I go ahead and play around with the settings, it may be a little bit hard to tell. If we set this down to something super low, it might be a little more apparent to us. It's going to be kind of hard to tell, I guess. If I set it to maybe, I don't know, something super, super low, you see, there we go. It's really easy to tell now that it is a very low resolution texture. Let's come back up to this 1024 though, and then I'm going to just, for example's sake, I'm going to come into this default pixel scale. I'm going to check that on. And if I change this, you're going to see, if I set it to like 4, this now changes to 1 to 4. So this is going to give us a quarter resolution of whatever resolution that we have set. I'm going to set this to like 16 just to really exaggerate that. And you can see as I check that on and off, hopefully that's coming through well, that it's going to make you a much lower resolution view. So that's just something that is going to allow you to just work a little bit faster if you want to, view things at a lower resolution and work at a lower resolution before you crank it up. So we could set this to like 2048, and then our working resolution while we have this proxy set up would be 1024. Now, if we want to see what our actual noise is looking like as far as tiling goes, everything inside of Copernicus here is going to tile by default. Now, if you jump into SOPs, that's going to be not necessarily tiling by default, so you have to be aware of that, and we'll have to fix that. But all of the noises and everything tile by default. So if we check this, we can actually preview what that looks like. Now you can see that we have this tiling view. I can check that on and off as I need. Let's go ahead and check this option right here. And as I crank this up, you can see that we're going to get more or less visualizations for our tiles. So you can set that to whatever you want to work with. I think 3 is fine for my personal preferences, but if you want to set that to more, you can. The other important setting here, though, is this default border. So let's go ahead and check that on. And you see we already get an update here. So with our tiling enabled, it's going to have a clamped border. You're going to see that it is no longer tiling. We can set this to be a constant if we want, which is going to just set it to be black for everything else. We can mirror this. So you can see we have some mirroring going on here, kind of all over the place, but it's super apparent right here. Or we can set this back to wrap, which is what it is by default if you don't have this checked. So I would just leave this unchecked. There may be cases, I guess, where you would want to not have that, but I personally think that you should leave that on wrap for most of your working situations. So that is kind of a basics of the cop nets and what we can do with them. We'll start to build more upon this. Actually, we'll start to build more on this and show some of the other things that we can do with these cop nets as time goes on. I'm going to make more videos in this series. This will be a whole playlist on my channel. So if you want to view all of these and get up and running with cops, then that's probably a playlist that you're going to want to take a look at. We will cover all sorts of different things. In the next video, I will probably go over how we can use custom geo with this, because there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. And depending on which context you're in, we'll maybe determine which one you use. I guess it kind of depends on what your workflow is. So we will cover more as time goes on here. So make sure you don't miss any of that. You take a look at the playlist and also subscribe if you don't want to miss any of those videos as we come through. Also, if you want to learn more about Houdini 20.5 and the new updates that come with it, then we will be covering a bunch of that in other videos on my channel as well. So if you're interested in learning more about the update, then definitely check those videos out as well. I already have some of those out as well on that. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Like I said, we're going to be covering more of cops as we go forward. So take a look at those if you're interested in learning more about that. Anyways, thank you guys for watching and have a good day.